Wine Wednesdays are back, baby. Cue the theme song. Well, it is good to be back. That song just brings me joy. Okay, we are back with another Scout and Cellar wine from my friend Kim. I'm going to put her website below, or her handle, whatever, so you can look her up. This is the Zinfandel Middle Jane. I love Scout and Cellar. I've talked about them a lot. I love their standards. They test everything 3 times. There's no sugar added, nothing added. Love it. I normally don't like Zinfandels, but this one has a really unique flavor to it. It's like not too sweet, just a little sweet. It's very unique, very like soft. That's a thing. On the lighter side, definitely not super heavy. So yeah, if you're looking for a kind of transition between the sweet and non-sweet, this is a really good one, and one of the more so cheaper ones that they sell. Okay, let's get into today's topic. We are going to be talking about brand researching and how to brand research. And to begin, we always have to whine first. So first of all, we're going to whine about the fact that this is even a thing and it needs to happen. And we have to be on top of companies about what kind of manufacturing practices they are and are not doing, because we care more about it than they do in some instances. That is just messed up. It's messed up. And it's annoying that you have to be like a sleuth, whatever, scientific leaning, I don't know, to understand the loopholes these companies are sometimes going through, you know? And just having to like continually, you just have to be on them all the time, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's very frustrating. Just the fact that companies aren't all 100% doing this all the time, it's just upsetting, okay? It's upsetting. All right, so really what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom. So I'm going to basically let you in on my process of what I do and what questions I ask when I brand research. Before we get into that though, if you haven't already, there are a ton of posts that I have done on my page and website about just the importance of why I think brand researching is important, more so than just merely looking at an ingredients label. So if you haven't already looked at those posts, maybe go do that and then come back. But in short, just the bluff to wrap that up. There's so much that goes into what makes a product safe or not for human health outside of just what is or isn't on an ingredients list. From the start of raw materials to when it hits the shelf, there are so many processes in the middle. If I have learned anything from this process of talking with dozens and dozens of founders and CEOs and COOs, is that there is so many ways to screw it up in the middle. And the quality and the process of every single thing is so important. And I think that really good, something to look at, what's the word? A good example is the somewhat recent heavy metals that were contaminated in the baby foods, the sunscreens that were contaminated with the known carcinogen. Those things were not on an ingredients label. And if you wouldn't have researched the brand, then you wouldn't have known that that was even in there, right? So there's a lot more than just the ingredients label. So I want to help teach you guys how to do it. So I want to go through my whole process of what I do, and then I'm also going to give you a faster version for those who don't have time, because I get that, and don't have, the know-how, or just, you want the basic, what's my basic thing? We're going to go over that. Okay, so let's start out with, I'm literally just going to read you my questions and explain to you what I look for when I'm talking with a company. I never, almost ever, 99.99999% of the time, I have to talk to someone. I don't just look at the website. Mostly because the website doesn't have the information I'm looking for. I think Seed Probiotic is like one of the only companies that I was like, literally everything I ask is on this website. And I was so amazed. So thank you, Seed, for being amazing. So this is an ever-changing list. So we're just going to go through this, okay? All right, number 1, do you third-party test all of your ingredients and your products for potential heavy metals or contaminations, etc. Do you have a COA, MSDS, TDS, so on and so forth, proving their safety for each individual ingredient? So, if you did not know this already, it is usually the manufacturer that works with the vendor, depending on the size of the company, and they are choosing which vendor or raw material supplier they are going with. This is why looking into the manufacturer and asking the company how much time they put into choosing their manufacturer, or better yet, if they manufacture themselves, is an important question we'll get to in a minute. But this is just the first one on the list that I have here. They should be testing they should be third party and in-house, preferably, testing all of their ingredients for some sort of contamination. If there's various small companies, sometimes just their supplier will be doing their own testing. I have different standards, if you will, for different sizes of companies, just because I know you can't pay for everything. So if you're a big company and they're not doing third-party testing on top of what their vendor is doing, that's a red flag to me. But if you're a small company and at least your raw material supplier, who you're getting it from, is doing their own third-party testing, then I'm like, okay. The most common answer I get, just from basically the size companies that I research the most, is just that they will do third-party testing occasionally on top of the third-party testing that is done on every batch that they get from the raw material supplier. They also should be receiving a COA, which is a certificate of analysis, from their vendor. They should also be keeping that on record. So I ask about that. That certificate of analysis has a lot of information in it. Very transparent companies will share that COA with you. There are a lot, though, that I've talked to that don't do that for proprietary reasons. I still, to this day, don't understand what is proprietary about that, because they could just mark out the name of their vendor. That's really the only information that I think would be proprietary on that sheet. Some are still not willing to do that, which is normally a little bit of a red flag. TDS is a technical data sheet that doesn't have as much information on it. Some have been more detailed than others that I have seen. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm looking for there. The point being, every batch, whether by the supplier or by the company, preferably both, is being tested for heavy metals and contaminations. That is a standard Clean Living Mom criteria question. Okay, next. Are you FDA compliant? Do you meet EU safety standards? And are your manufacturing facilities FDA inspected? Also, do you work with an FDA consultant? I've recently added that question. So this would obviously depend on the type of product that they sell. If they are a drug manufacturer, so if they have any kind of beauty product that would have an active ingredient in it, they are required to be FDA registered. A company that is not a drug manufacturer they're not required to be FDA registered. So like really no accountability whatsoever, in other words. They don't get audited, no one comes and checks their facility. So even if they don't have drugs, like being active ingredients, so like sunscreen, that would be a drug manufacturer, quote unquote. Even if they don't have that, I still ask, are you registered? Because I just want to make sure. I think it's like a step of transparency that is technically not required, but they should be doing over and above what the required is. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so also some don't sell in the EU, but know that they would meet the standards. So I kind of just feel that one out and see kind of what they respond with. The point just being, do you have anyone kind of like auditing you? You know, like let's start there at least. Because if they will get audited, and they will have like surprise visits by the FDA if they are registered. So next, how involved are you with your manufacturer and supplier manufacturing process? Are any of your manufacturers ISO certified, and do your manufacturers follow GMP standards? So this is kind of one of those, like, you just, by experience, I've kind of learned what kind of answers are good and what aren't. So it's kind of long to like get into, but I'm looking for very involved. Just, basically, bottom line. I want to see that they are involved, that the company, whoever it is in the company, is very involved in who their manufacturer is. I am normally pretty leery when they have a contract manufacturer, just because so many, like over and above what I keep hearing, contract manufacturers, it is incredibly hard to find one that is above board and really good and isn't just doing the bottom line what they have to do. And not even just safety wise, but also like putting in the minimal amount of an ingredient to be able to call it a cucumber mask or whatever. Not putting in the amount that would also actually, you know, have an effect and be like an effective product, okay? Manufacturers, especially when they're contract manufacturing, there are sometimes, not all times, but sometimes, they are also in charge of a lot of the formulas. So that's another thing I'm kind of looking at. I want to know, that's another question on here. Do you formulate yourself or does your manufacturer formulate? So I want to see that really most optimal is they have their own manufacturing. I'd say a good amount of the companies that that's a fairly common thing to have your own manufacturing. Gets more complicated when it's a drug manufacturer. That's like a whole other set of guidelines and it opens up like a whole new thing, and that's a lot harder for them to do and to get into. So if they're not already equipped for that, or if they're kind of in like a building phase of like getting bigger, just so you know, that's kind of harder, you know, so a little more grace there. But if they can manufacture themselves, that is typically much better, and I know their standards are going to be a lot better. I ask a lot more questions when they're contract manufacturing, because there's just a lot more times than not that the contract manufacturer is cutting corners, you know? So when I'm asking if your manufacturer is ISO certified, ISO is the international standard for, or international standard, what is it? Organization, I forget. Why can't I remember what ISO stands for? All right, I'm having a brain fog, but ISO is like, that's very outside of like Clean Living Brands and stuff. That's a very like universal manufacturing standard. And the thing that I like about that is it's totally third party, not government run. And it really just has to do with very strict manufacturing standards. So it's like across the board, no matter what products you have, are you following basic, good, safe standards? So I've talked with a lot of manufacturers who've been in the business for a long time, and who've done manufacturing for a long time, and their take on it is like, you know, if you're not ISO certified, you're not really like, you're pretty amateur, you know. Like if you want to be taken seriously in the manufacturing world, you've got to be ISO certified. So I really like it when companies have an ISO certification on their manufacturing, because it just shows a little bit more of like that they're prioritizing that and that they know what they're doing. It's typically only the smaller companies that aren't ISO certified and are like, oh yeah, that's not really that necessary. And I'm like, okay, I give it a few years. You'll be back. You'll end up getting it. And then following GMP standards, that's general, good manufacturing practices rather. That's an FDA standard, not a requirement, but a standard. They should be going above that. Okay, so that's like bottom of the barrel. Like you should be doing that. If you're not, that's not good. Okay, do you disclose all ingredients on every product, including your fragrance components of all your products? Sometimes a company that I'm researching, it's just really hard to like look through, 100 products for every single one. So I just like to ask them up front and just make sure you disclose all your ingredients, right? And then if they don't, and if fragrance is on there, I always ask why, because there have actually been a lot of reasons that I have found fragrance on a label to actually still meet the like Clean Living Mom criteria. I have a whole post on this. Go check it out because it's kind of a whole nother rabbit trail. But just to give one example, if they are following INCI labeling standards, which is not required, but again, one of those things that's like, you know what you're doing if you're following INCI labeling standards. That's more of like a European, that's more like EU required, but not in the US. Anyway, technically there is a preservative that has to be labeled fragrance for some reason. Don't know why. It's dumb. That's a dumb standard, but whatever. It has to be labeled fragrance under the INCI labeling standards. But it is just a preservative that is actually naturally derived. That's like plant naturally derived. So that's one where if you would have just been looking at the label, you would have been like fragrance, no. But if you ask the company, it actually turned out that it's a totally very regularly used plant derived preservative. Totally fine. Okay, so just because fragrance is on something doesn't, I always look into it. I'm never just like, it's probably fine. I always ask why. And like I said, I have a whole nother post on that, so just go look at that. If the products include essential oils, are those oils GCMS tested in lab for potential adulterations? Who is your essential oil supplier, or do they give you those GCMS tests for verification per batch? This is not just a COA or the TDS, technical data sheet. This has to specifically be GCMS. You are not a legitimate oil supplier if you're not giving a GCMS test per batch for every single oil batch that you're selling. So if there's times that a company is getting that, like, and they're like, oh no, we actually haven't even seen the GCMS, and I'm like, nope, red flag, red flag, red flag, change your supplier. So that's really important. There's so much to say on the essential oil side of it, but that's the biggest thing that really does weed out a lot of the like suppliers that wouldn't be good. I also ask if they're like formulating with someone who's used to essential oils, and are those essential oils less than 3% of your like product, and does it have proper dilution? That's really important. Sometimes it's too high, so I definitely ask about that. I like to ask, what ingredients do you stay away from, and do you keep up to date on the current scientific literature on the safety of various ingredients? I'm looking for an answer here of just like, yes, we're looking at that. We're not just saying it because the EWG said not to use it. Like, I want to see you're doing your own research, depending on how big the company is, depending what kind of like personality. Some of the founders are way more like research nerds than others, which is kind of fun to find out. But I want to see if they're like keeping up to date with that, and they're changing their standards based on other things that have changed. Do you challenge test your products? What do you test for in your challenge tests or your shelf life tests? Do you pass those tests? There are so many different types. Again, way too long to get into now, but there are so many different types of preservation. Some are better than others. But I kind of want to know which ones they're doing, and like have them name it. And especially asking this question, and the next question, do you do double micros? Double micros is you are doing a microbial test both when, for a manufacturer, they say when it's batched and when it's filled. So batched means the raw material, and when it's filled being the product at the end. I want to see microbial testing at both stages, especially if the product has water or aloe in it, and is water and aloe based. I think they call it an anhydrous product. No, that's the one that doesn't have water. I forget. I gotta look it up again. I have it in notes on my phone somewhere. Okay. Do you work with or consult with a cosmetic chemist, a formulator, when coming up with your formulas? Or if they're not a beauty company, I ask if they work with like an herbalist. I just think that's really important. Are all formulas made in-house, or do you contract out the manufacturer? Again, kind of a red flag when the manufacturer is coming up with it, just because typically the manufacturer is not used to clean ingredients. Like, if they are getting formulas from a manufacturer that's like a bought, pre-made formula that the manufacturer has, then I want to see that manufacturer only works with clean companies and has like an ISO certification maybe on it, because a lot of times they can't disclose the ingredients then, because it's something that many companies use and they don't have the rights to disclose it. So there is an ISO like natural certification. I think it's 9234 or 9235 that ensures that everything is completely naturally derived. So I also ask if the company is privately held, and I just make sure of that. For supplements wise, I'm also asking like if there's any clinical trials that have been done on the products to back up claims. If I'm seeing claims made on the website, I want to know if their products are USP or NSF verified. I'm also, by the way, looking at third-party certifications. I'm looking on their website for companies, any company, to see if they have any kind of a third-party certification. Why that is important, because I know some will say, all certifications aren't equal. That's true. I really want to see one that just gets into the manufacturing practice more than anything, which is not going to be EWG verified, by the way. They don't look into manufacturing at all, so that one does not count. I want to look into something more that's like, the QAI organic, or the Organ Tilth organic. USDA organic looks into some manufacturing stuff. Made Safe is one of my favorites. So something like that that's going to be looking into the actual ingredients and the manufacturing. I think that's very important. Not just looking at individual ingredients, but looking at the product as a whole. Okay, back to supplements. I'm also, a big thing with supplements is I'm asking if their vitamins and minerals are synthetically derived, or whole food or plant-based or herb derived. I think that that's incredibly important. I ask a lot about what kind of testings they do for contaminations. A lot of the same questions, just asking if they work with any holistic practitioners or doctors, functional medicine, herbalists, that sort of a thing. The biggest thing is really asking if it's a lot of the same manufacturing questions, but the biggest thing is really asking about the if they're synthetically or naturally derived. I'm also asking if everything, when it comes to like supplements of any kind, I'm asking if they're falling underneath the California Prop 65 standards. That's very important. And not just meeting the requirements, not the same thing. You could have something that triggers that and you're correctly putting the label on it, but and that is technically meeting the requirements for California Prop 65. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for that you fall underneath it and your product does not trigger needing that label on it. That's in California and everywhere, okay? Shouldn't have the label on it. When it does, that's kind of concerning to me, and I would want to look into it more and ask why. So yeah, okay, that's the general. Now, if we had to, there's more, but those are our biggest ones there, okay? Based on that, I kind of go back and forth with the companies sometimes. So the faster version of that, if you're looking for, that kind of takes a lot of time to ask all those questions and whatnot. Number one, the biggest thing, if you were looking for, like, just give me your bottom of the barrel, like, I just want to, how do I know if the company is good, right? Number one, is it privately held? You can Google that yourself. You can just look up who owns X company, and you can typically find out literally just from that. A business website I use sometimes that normally is pretty good on staying up to date on requirements is Crunchbase. They have a lot of information about a company and stuff, will normally be accurate. I'm looking at the ingredients. Are they fully disclosed? If there is fragrance, I always ask the company why, to get the full story on it, or at least check the website, because sometimes they will do the full disclosure on the website but not the product bottle. Also, just look at the website. I never, when I'm assessing a product for safety, only look at just the product. You have to look at the website as well. Look and see if the website has any information about their manufacturing practices. Look and see if they have any talk about what they're sourcing from. And, also making sure that all of it falls under the California Prop 65 standards. Also, the biggest thing that kind of makes it easier is just, do they have some sort of a third-party certification? There are times when I'm talking with a company that I'll vet one and it'll meet my, Clean Living Mom standards, and they won't have a certification, but I've really grilled them hard on their manufacturing and stuff. The biggest reason why I think a certification of some sort is very important is just because companies, the biggest thing that I find is that they don't know what they don't know. A lot of these cleaner companies are not maliciously trying to, pull the wool over your eyes and lie to you. Some are, but most of them are not. Most of them just don't know what they're doing. So having a third-party certification is incredibly helpful for just giving a checks and balance system to what they're trying to do. And it's ensuring that someone is checking and there's an accountability there, because there's just so many, like I said, steps in the process that you just don't know as the consumer what they are and are not doing. So especially if it's a contract manufacturer, but even when they're doing their own manufacturing, I want to see that there are people who are knowledgeable, they're working with experts, and they have accountability to ensure that they are checking all of the boxes, because more times than not, there are things falling through the cracks when there is not a third-party certification. Okay, that's about it. That was a lot, but thanks so much for sitting through that. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below, and I would be happy to answer them. This is ever-changing, like I said, always adding to this list, so that's my current list of things, and I hope you found it helpful.